If you're a cinephile, if you genuinely love movies, I can tell you something about yourself that you've probably never admitted to anyone. Yes, I know, it's a bold claim, but stay with me. Because hidden inside this strange thing you've probably done your entire life is one of the great secrets of filmmaking. If you understand it, your work will begin to change. People may still compliment your cinematography. They may still admire your performances, your editing, or the way you move the camera. But eventually, they'll start saying something much more important. That film affected me. I can't stop thinking about it. I don't know why, but it stayed with me. That's the moment an admirer becomes a fan. Not because they like the way your movie looked, because your movie gave them something. The secret is simple. In fact, you've probably been circling it your whole life. You may simply not have understood what you were doing. Let me tell you a story. I grew up in Puerto Rico during the 1970s and 80s. Things were a little different back then. We didn't have cable television. Puerto Rico had 3 channels. 2 of them were semi-good. The third was trash. You didn't scroll through 500 options trying to decide what to watch. You watched what was on, and you were grateful. Movies became an escape for me. They transported me to places I had never seen. They allowed me to experience lives I couldn't imagine living and emotions I didn't even know how to name. But access to movies was limited. If you wanted to see a film, you went to the theater. Then it disappeared. And you might not see it again until it eventually showed up on television, cut to pieces, interrupted by commercials, and dubbed into Spanish by some actor who sounded nothing like Harrison Ford. Then around my 9th or 10th birthday, my father told me he had bought me something I had always wanted. I couldn't imagine what it was. It was our first VCR. Now, for anyone who grew up with streaming, you have to understand what a miracle this was. For the first time, you could bring a movie home. You could watch it whenever you wanted. You could rewind it. You could watch the same moment over and over again until your family begged you to stop. It was revolutionary. And for a cinephile like me, it changed everything. The first 2 films my father brought us were Superman, the Christopher Reeve one, and Raiders of the Lost Ark. I was hooked. I watched those movies repeatedly, never got tired of them. There was one moment in Superman that absolutely destroyed me. Lois Lane is hanging from a helicopter above the Daily Planet building. She falls. And then Clark Kent sees what's happening. He runs towards the building, pulls open his shirt, and reveals the Superman symbol underneath. Then he flies. You have to remember, audiences were not used to seeing that. We had flying superheroes on television, but they looked like men being dragged through the air by 2 stagehands and a clothesline. This was different. Christopher Reeve rose into the air, and for a moment, I believed a man could fly. It was magic. I remember watching that scene and thinking, that's what I want to do. I didn't know how. I didn't even understand what a director really did, but I knew I wanted to create that feeling. And then I started doing something interesting. I began inviting people to my house just to show them that scene. I wouldn't always play the entire movie. Who has time for context? I wanted to get straight to Superman. I'd bring one of my cousins over, and remember, I'm Puerto Rican, I have a lot of cousins. I would sit them in front of the television and put in the tape, fast forward to the right moment, and press play. But once the scene started, I wouldn't watch the television. I'd already seen it. I watched them. I watched their faces. I waited for their eyes to open. I waited for the smile. I wanted to see the exact moment when the magic reached them. And when it did, I felt an enormous sense of joy. It was almost as powerful as seeing the scene for the first time myself. Maybe even more powerful, because now I had given the experience to someone else. And that is why I eventually became a filmmaker. I wanted to spend my life making people feel something. Now let me tell you a thing I know about you. You've done this too. At some point, you have invited someone to watch a movie that meant something to you. Maybe it was a partner, your child, your friend, a cousin. You said, you have to see this. But what you really meant was, I want to share something with you that changed me. You sat beside them pretending to watch the movie, but every once in a while you looked over. You were checking their face. You were waiting for the scene. You know the scene, the moment that broke your heart, the moment that made you laugh, the moment that made you understand something about life that you hadn't understood before. And you desperately wanted them to feel it too. When they did, something passed between you. A private understanding, a small bond. You had traveled somewhere together. It was almost like a rite of passage. But when they didn't pay attention, when they looked at their phone, when they got up to make a sandwich during the greatest scene in the history of cinema, you were devastated. Not because your recommendation had failed, not because you wanted to prove you had superior taste, well, maybe a little, but mostly you were disappointed because you wanted something for them. You believed that experience might improve their life. You wanted to give them what the movie had once given you. That is an act of service. And hidden inside that impulse is the secret of great storytelling. Cinema is a service industry. I don't mean that in the corporate sense. I don't mean the audience is always right. The audience is frequently wrong. I mean that stories exist to give people something they cannot easily get in their everyday lives. They give us access to experiences we may never have. They allow us to face death safely, to experience courage before we need it, to fall in love from inside another person's heart, to understand people we might otherwise judge, to survive loss, to imagine redemption, to believe for 2 hours that a man can fly. Stories give us information for living. That's why human beings have carried them from one generation to the next since long before anyone invented a camera. Storytelling may have been our first superpower. Through stories, someone's experience could survive them. Their fear, knowledge, mistakes, discoveries, and hopes could travel into the future. That's an extraordinary service. And I believe filmmakers forget it at their peril. I rarely invite people over to show them movies anymore. Part of that is simply age. I've become old and bitter. It happens. But I also think many films no longer move me in the same way. Too many filmmakers are obsessed with the intellectual performance of cinema, the clever reference, the beautiful composition, the complicated structure, the shot designed to become a screenshot on Instagram. Films become collections of cool moments instead of complete emotional experiences. They look impressive, but they don't stay with us. It's the difference between being cool and being resonant. And you cannot create resonance by concentrating only on the surface. You have to connect the film to something inside you that genuinely moves you. That is the first part of what I call my triple C system. Find the core, make choices, connect with the audience. The core is not the subject of your movie. It isn't the plot. It is the deep reason you need to tell the story. The wound, the hope, the fear, the question you cannot stop asking. Once you find that, you make choices that express it. That is invisible storytelling. The audience may not consciously recognize it, but they will feel it. Whenever I feel that something is missing from my work, I return to that little boy in Puerto Rico, the boy with the VCR. The boy fast forwarding through Superman, dragging another cousin into the room and saying, you have to see this. He wasn't concerned with being considered an artist. He wasn't thinking about festivals. He wasn't thinking about reviews, algorithms, distribution, or whether anyone would call him a genius. He wanted to create wonder. He wanted to make someone feel what he had felt. That impulse was pure. Every artist has to protect some version of that. because the world will give you many reasons to forget. Great cinema doesn't say, look how clever I am. It says, come with me. Let me show you something. You may recognize yourself here. That is why your favorite films feel personal. They were made by strangers, but somehow they know you. And when you share one of those films with another person, you are continuing the act of service. The filmmaker gave you something. Now you are passing it on. That may be one of the most beautiful things cinema allows us to do. If this idea resonated with you, hit like and subscribe. I teach filmmakers how to create films that matter. And if you'd like to learn more about the principles behind my approach, download my free Storytelling Starter Kit. It would help you find the core of your story, make stronger creative choices, and build a deeper connection with your audience. The link is in the description below. And remember, don't just direct your movies, direct your life.